Hey. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our Ideas Destination Postcard What is Idea Trying to Cause session. My name is Crystal Madison, and I'm the Director of Change Work for IDEA. If you'd like to join us for as a video participant, please click on the link that is in the events page on Google+. If you would like to just view, feel free to do that as well. Um, we are also joined via video by Sean Strader, our communications manager, Scott Nine, our executive director, and Mr. Dana Bennis. Dana, what is your new title as of this week? No, I'm just joking.
I don't think I have a new title yet. I'll let you know, though.
Okay. All Things Learning, Dana Base. CEO of Learning. All right. So the idea for this session really came from Scott. I have to give him the credit with being creative and thinking about this session as it relates to where IDEA is and what we're trying to cause and what we're doing. Earlier this year, well, I'll start off by telling a story, a little background about Destination Postcards and why this session is important. So sit back, relax. Once upon a time, this is a story of a teacher named Crystal. Not me, but a different Crystal. And she actually taught at a school in Atlanta, Georgia. She was teaching first grade. She was beginning her first year of teaching first grade at a school that did not have a kindergarten. So all of the students were coming into first grade without having kindergarten. Some of them didn't have preschool or daycare. So the skill level for the students was very daunting. It ranged from some of them not knowing their ABCs, some of them being able to read, some of them knowing some of their alphabet. So she was daunted with the task of getting them to first grade, at least first grade level. Okay, so that's Crystal, and her last name is Jones. Then you have another teacher, Teacher B, who is nameless, who also had the same type challenge of working with a classroom of students who ranged in skill level. But the difference between these two teachers is their approach to reaching their end goal. So Teacher B, who is nameless, we'll call her Tammy for today. So Tammy, in her planning and getting ready for the course of the year, reported on her goals for the year as wanting to use different assessment tools to increase reading and spelling skills, and just using those different skills, but not necessarily mapping out how the students will get to that destination. Her goal was, of course, ambitious, and it was specific and good because, as we know, a lot of teachers have to, develop lesson plans and teaching plans for the year. But it wasn't useful in lighting the fire in teaching or educating or helping first graders learn what they needed to learn. Now we'll go back to Crystal. Not me, a different Crystal. She had the same objective. She wanted to actually motivate her students, but at the same time, she approached it in a different way. She knew she had to be able to speak their language. So what she did, she set a goal for the class, not necessarily through assessment and saying, they'll reach their goal through reading and assessment, but she spoke their language, and what she shared as a goal with the students, not necessarily dictating the goal, but with the students, she shared the goal of, that they are all going to the third grade. Not literally the third grade, but third grade as in like their reading level and overall skills over the course of the year. She also started out the year calling her students scholars and actually telling them exactly what that meant. So they would have times where they would have visitors come to the classroom, parents, administrators would come to the classroom, and she would introduce them, the students, as scholars. And she would always ask the scholars, okay, now what is a scholar? Why are you a scholar? What is a scholar? And all of the students would reply in unison, a scholar is someone who lives to learn and is good at it. So long story short, towards the spring semester, by the time spring came around, all of the students in the class were reading and spelling at second grade level. What she did for her students was she had a graduation in the middle of the year, and by the end of the year, over 90% of her students were actually at or above third grade reading level. So just think about it. She started out the year with students who were all on different levels and not necessarily coming in all at the same pace. But by the end of the year, because she shared a shared goal and because she named a destination that they were attracted to and that was speaking their language, they were able to reach their goal. So I wanted to share that story because it takes us to where we got the idea for checking out what exactly is a destination postcard. That story is actually an excerpt from the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. The book was introduced to us by Malia Dicker, who is actually one of the founders and board members of IDEA, the Institute for Democratic Education in America. Now for IDEA's story. It was a cold, snowy, and rainy day in Washington, D.C. at the end of March 2014. During this specific weekend, IDEA's board and staff got together for 3 days of intensive meetings to discuss where IDEA is, where IDEA wanted to be in the future, and we did that by focusing on the different learnings that we have going on currently and learnings from the past. So really quick, because I like to do interactive sessions, what I wanted to do, and this, is probably going to be redundant, but at the same time, it's maybe kind of fun because we may pull something else out. Wanted to ask you all, as viewers or video participants, what is IDEA trying to cause? That was pretty much a question that we tried to answer over that weekend. So we're going to go down the line with our video viewers first, and then check our Q&A box to see if there's anyone who wanted to share as well. But from what you know and have learned about IDEA, what is IDEA trying to cause? I'll give everybody about 25 seconds, and then we'll start going down the line. And to give you a heads up, I think Scott is first, and then Dana, and then Sean, and then myself. I probably could have used the Google effects for that particular sound effect, but didn't get to it quick enough. Okay. Dana? First up, and if you're talking, you're on mute.
Hello.
Hey.
Switching around order. I was not ready. What is IDEA trying to cause?
Yes.
So when I think about this question, I guess for me I start to have images in my head, and so the images are of vibrant action and conversation happening within school buildings and outside of school buildings, and with talking about education. There are young people, there are adults, including educators, youth workers, there are parents, there are community leaders, and what I see is that there's great ownership and great power is given to those communities of people to be able to chart their education in their community. When I think about this question of what is it trying to cause, I'm envisioning this dynamic conversation happening, where the conversation about education and the direction forward is both held locally as well as kind of with an understanding of the broad national to local connections. And there's an open there's open, people are aware of what's happening in other places. They have both awareness, but also the kind of the capacity to be able to call on those other people. The networks are strong. The web is strong enough to create that, and so it's an ongoing, and it's not a perfection. I don't envision a perfection, but I envision a place where the right tools and the right connections are there so and the right understanding about the need for that kind of the local voice and control of those who are closest to education, being able to be in part of leading that conversation. So that's what I envision. That idea is working to cause that to happen, to create a situation in which that becomes the reality.
All right. Awesome, Dana. Sean?
Yeah, I can go. Let's see. I guess the vision of what idea is trying to create for me, or co-create or support, is it's very similar to Dana's, but maybe I can say it in different words and something new will come out. Ideas working to support and create, not create, but support communities of people who are vested in education and kind of, civic engagement and just communal engagement and building communities, supporting those communities to understand kind of, not to understand, but supporting communities who are seeking to be empowered and also helping to empower folks who feel less empowered, I guess, in the way education is carried out around the United States, while noting that education isn't just what's going on in the classroom, and it doesn't stop at the front door of the classroom either, broadening the understanding of education to include families and, civic life in community centers, or just around the city, around the town, around rural places. Ideas working to, it's funny, I'm just wanting to recite like a destination postcard that we've built in that thing, and so I'm trying to reinvent it without just stating that. Ideas vision for me is an empowered community of people who have a say, a meaningful say, and a realistic say in how education is unfolding in their communities. And not only locally, but also working to kind of weave like local change makers and those who are empowered with other people around the nation to show that a positive and budding, supportive and meaningful conversation and education is possible in the United States and in Puerto Rico and even further than that. That's probably the best I'll summarize it right now, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Mm-hmm. So as for me, one of the things that I always think about, and I'll reflect on something that I shared in our previous session on, my drawing, of course, with idea being that connector of dots and actually highlighting bright spots, because after being affiliated and working with idea over the past year and a half, I've learned so much about different ways of educating and promoting education in different areas, because a lot of us who got educated through public schools are used to that teaching to the test and then passing the test and moving forward, where their idea focuses on making sure that different ways of educating to promote active citizens is elevated and highlighted. One of the other things that I think about also with the idea, one of the only things that I think I probably remember from social studies in middle school is having memorized the preamble to the Constitution. And I know idea is not trying to do that, but I often think of that in the fact that through democratic education, you do promote, the general welfare of the people, and you try to establish justice across, different communities, across the country in Puerto Rico. So, and another thing that I like about IDEA is, IDEA is not afraid of, the tensions that will come with that, because as we know, different organizations and different educational organizations may not agree or may not approach the work in the same way, but there are bright spots in in certain areas, and also some dim spots that may need to be people need to be educated on. But the fact that IDEA is that vehicle to actually share the information about that and to actually educate folks on what's out there, and the fact that idea doesn't make it necessarily about them, is a good example for what other educational organizations and agencies should focus to do and should focus on, and actually should try to cause. It's about, building, and it's about youth, and it's about educating, and one of the things that we've lost in education is making sure that people develop a love for wanting to learn, versus wanting to learn to pass the test. Because wanting to learn versus wanting to learn to pass the test helps prepare you for the future. Critical thinking skills and other things like that. And I'll stop there because I can probably go on, and I'll let Scott, if you're ready, you can finish us out.
Well, I'm not very creative, but I'm going to focus on the thing that stays standing out in my mind from the March weekend and is then still most alive in my mind now, which is the idea of a engaged or informed majority. If I had to make things really simple, it is simply that we take the idea that the general public isn't informed, or a collected majority that has a positive vision for an education that is just and sustainable and relevant and engaging, and remaining driven by a sense of kind of equity or access for everyone. And that's a complicated thing to envision. It gets confusing very fast if you begin to try to think about all the things that need to happen. But it's also really simple. How do we paint the picture between what we currently have and what we want? And how can an organization like IDEA help tip people to creating it? And in its simplest form, it is the reason that the majority part is interesting is it recognizes the social political limitations, that's not something that necessarily everyone's going to be on board with, but an underlying belief that people want to do that. The other thing that I think stands out to me is the idea of being in relationship with. So trying to do that in a way that's not just in relationship with a student, or a student to a teacher, or a teacher to a community, or parents to the school, but the school to the neighborhood to other neighborhoods, the United States in relationship with other countries, and trying to interrupt the kind of power over model of not just teaching and learning, but how we relate to each other, and that lives in our education system currently, and we're trying to do that differently by practicing differently. And so those are the two things that jump out at me to talk about.
Awesome, thanks. So when we got to Washington, D.C. as a board and staff to discuss IDEA, what IDEA is trying to cause, where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do, what we're focusing on, how we've grown, what we've learned, the idea came up in regards to the Destination Postcard. And I read an excerpt from the book that I mentioned earlier. And a Destination Postcard is a picture of a future that hard work can make possible. And the reason that the Destination Postcard was so attractive, or what some of us like to call sexy, was because it actually helped you to look at where you were trying to go, what obstacles may possibly arise, what it would take to get there, and helps you draw out the different steps in how to get there, and it helps you dream big. So one of the warnings that came with the book is that it can be incredibly inspiring, and I think it was just that for us within IDEA, because I had never heard of a Destination Postcard or the concept until that gathering back in March. So to start off, what we did and how we got to the document that we're going to be talking about a little bit later is each one of us was charged with creating a statement, kind of like a a statement of what we thought IDEA was trying to cause. Like, if we could dream big, like, what did we think IDEA was trying to move towards? So each one of us created, different statements. And I think by the end of it, after counting through and looking through the notes, we came up with 13 different statements. And after typing all of them out, Dana was able to create this image of what words popped up the most. So you have words, of course, education. You have communities, public, needs, create, sustainable, according, systems, Nuestra Escuela, which is one of the schools that we're partnered with down in Puerto Rico, resources, access, quality. So from that, we developed a very wordy, not necessarily mission or vision, but a wordy statement that kind of put everything together in context for us for exactly what we are trying to do, where we're trying to go, and what we're trying to cause. So from that came this statement. An engaged, informed, and energized majority clear about the role of education in a just society, where enough people and communities in the U.S. and Puerto Rico have the tools, visions, stories, and strategies to create educational experiences and systems that lead towards young people and nations that are resourceful, equitable, and sustainable. Citizens are active, lifelong learners who desire, create, and utilize knowledge to improve their lives and their world. So really quickly, I'm going to give everyone 10 seconds to think of one sentence to summarize that 4-sentence statement. One sentence that could possibly summarize what all of that is saying. And I'll give you more like 30 seconds. All right. So we'll go popcorn. Whoever wants to go first can go first. Not all at the same time, though.
I can go first, or I can try to. One sentence. A community of people. Okay. Reset. A community of people who constitute a majority with vested interest in the well-being and benefit of people and communities overall, who are educated and empowered in such a way that they can effect change within how education is carried out across the United States, which then trickles down to impact the social, communal, and otherwise lives of the majority / all people in the United States is what I got. That was like math. I feel like that was word math.
I think you rewrote the paragraph, but just made
Yeah,
a long sentence.
some commas in there.
It's a lot in there, yeah. I think for me, even just looking at it, like the last sentence pretty much sums up everything for me. Citizens are active, lifelong learners who desire, create, and utilize knowledge to improve their lives and their world. Because to me, that sentence is going to take everything that's written before. It's going to take the visions. It's going to take the stories. It's going to take the strategies in order for that to happen and take place. Dana or Scott?
Well, let's see. To play along here, um, uh, from the it's funny because as I think about the work that went into boil down, many sentences to 3 sentences, I'm not quite sure how much we can boil down further.
Right.
But if I do it, and maybe it could create something that is even more simple. But so I came up with an engaged majority that has the tools to create educational experiences that build a more just society.
Awesome. Could you say that one more time, Dana?
Yeah, an engaged majority that has the tools to create educational experiences that build a more just society.
Awesome. You know what? This sounds like the sentence that you said back in March. No, I'm just joking.
Maybe you're right.
This is Scott. I'm trying hard to find good. I struggle. I won't say why I struggle. I think sometimes we take a complicated world and we want to parse it down into too few words because we think we should, and it doesn't actually serve us well because the details matter. That being said, I know that's not always true, and if I get over my resistance, what I came up with was contribute to an emerging movement where all people and communities thrive.
Awesome. And what it feels like is the sentences that were created can actually be added onto this, as a collective whole. Because you're right, Scott, this is hard it's not anything that you would really want to simplify because it does have a lot of detail and context. Just an activity to see how low we could go. All right, so from out of this weekend in DC with the staff, our destination postcard, which is included in the document that's about to be shared, led us to create this document called An Idea with More Precision, just so that we can sharpen and focus and strategize around what exactly we were trying to cause, how we could take what we've already done over the past 5 years and narrow our focus to because one of the things with the idea that we talk about a lot is sometimes there's so much that we want to do as it pertains to democratic education that sometimes we need to narrow our focus so that we can actually see more progress and more output. So An Idea with More Precision helped us to do that and to narrow things down just a bit. So at the top of the document, and I think I read this quote just about once a week, is a quote that it's Tai Te Ching. Is that correct, Scott?
No, it's the Tao Te Ching.
I am all wrong. Say it one more time.
You pronounce it Tao.
Tao
Te
Ching.
Tao Te Ching.
Tao Te Ching. Okay. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back, the only path to serenity. Awesome. So as I said before, during that weekend, we took a step back to look forward in order to focus on what we needed to sharpen, what we needed to pull out, add in, so that we can move forward with the work that we were doing. So if you go and look in the showcasing, I shared the document, and we have about 15 minutes, so I'll make sure to hit the high spots, and if there's anything that I'm missing that needs to be shared out, fellas, please feel free to follow behind and add those in, because this is a long document. So over the course of the weekend, we talked about a lot of the things that were important in Sacred's idea, what keeps people engaged, why are we engaged? And a lot of the things that came out are, the relationships, the values, the community building, our focus on learning, collaborating and partnerships. And I think this is one of the things that I tried to emphasize earlier as we talked about organizing in one of our earlier sessions, how important relationships are and how important relationship building is, because you can't have movement or promote social justice without it. and there are many more, and they're not in any particular order in regards to the aspects that we hold most sacred with IDEA. So in regards to some of the best work over the past 5 years, earlier today we did have a session highlighting one of the items that we feel is one of a part of our best work, which was a year at Mission Hill, which is listed here. Also connecting so many dots. I think you'll probably hear that in every session or presentation that we have as it pertains to IDEA, because IDEA is about connecting the dots and bridging relationships and connecting organizations and individuals. Innovation tours. We're actually going to have a session that's going to talk about some of our showcasing pieces, and innovations tours are an important part of that. Capacity to turn what we have into what we need to get what we want. This is a statement that was shared from our board chair, Santiago, about IDEA and how we turn what we have into what we need, into what we want, in order to move forward. Making sense of what is happening. As we all know, via social media, via the internet, via newspapers, via word of mouth, there's a lot going on as it pertains to education, as it pertains to educational justice, as it pertains to social justice within education realms across the country in Puerto Rico. And what we try to do is we try to share those stories, because people learn best from hearing stories to make sense of what's happening. Presence on social networking. Of course, throughout the time that we're having virtual IDEA Camp, we are, of course, doing it through Google Hangout on Air, but we're also sharing out information via Twitter and Facebook. Connecting Nuestra Escuela and Jefferson County Open School, mapping the educational landscape. And one of the last things that's on the list is mastering Google Hangouts, because IDEA believes in connecting the dots and also being able to do that virtually and not necessarily having to connect the dots face to face. Mastering Google Hangouts was a big, a good deal for us, because it's helping us to connect with each other from across different parts of the country in Puerto Rico, and also with other organizers and organizations that we are partnered and working with. IDEA's Destination Postcard. We talked about that earlier, and this is the chunk that was shared earlier in the presentation about how we got to, our larger phrase, and letting go of, trying to wordsmith everything, and making sure that we are focused and clear on what's possible for IDEA and what IDEA is up to. And as I said earlier, that 3-sentence nugget pretty much was derived from a combination of the 13 statements that we shared. A theory of action. IDEA's theory of action does not have to be as complicated as we've sometimes made it. We do a lot of, as I've said before, connecting the dots. We also engage people that have deep knowledge and expertise in different areas as it pertains to learning and education. One of the things that we mentioned earlier as it pertains to like our organizers, we do have place-based organizing teams, and we also have what we call national fellows. And all of our national fellows are experts in different areas as it pertains to education, and also cover different boundary partners, whether they be parents, educators, community leaders or community members, but also have what we feel is a specific expertise in one of the 4 drivers of change. Third, IDEA is developing and nurturing social capital across a growing network that is preparing to ground for the adoption, widespread dissemination, and sustainability of educational change across the country. Okay, and I'm going to keep scrolling on down. Earlier today, we learned a lot about, Dana shared with us the history of, the inception of IDEA, where the idea for IDEA came from, and where we emerged from, and how the image of the spider web or the squiggly lines, I think that's supposed to be a spider web, that image actually came from one of IDEA's very first PowerPoint presentations in regards to what they were hoping to do. We've thought about networks and relationships in different ways. And we talked earlier about how we're not necessarily a network of our own, but and we're not building separate networks, but we're like an input into networks of different sorts. So one way that we frame a lot of the work that we do is, of course, place-based education, social justice education and organizing, education for sustainability, social emotional learning, systems thinking, youth power, voice, and democracy. And I've been mentioning a lot about our partners in change, which we also call our boundary partners, which are youth, parents, educators, school leaders, community leaders, and organizations, unions, foundations, and policymakers in media. One other way to conceptualize our work is on, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today as it pertains to education. Common Core, school choice, charters and vouchers, school to prison pipeline, corporatization, high stakes testing, race to the top, no child left behind. One of the key learnings that we've had is that we seem to be evolving from human capital to social capital. We're about, and we do a lot of focusing on connecting early adapters and change makers and skill connectors because we don't believe in working in, silos. Although, like I mentioned before, different organizations and institutions may have different strategies. It's important to try to, bring these different individuals in different areas to the table so that we can learn from each other and help continue to build what we need as sustainable communities. And I can give an example of that. In Minnesota, what our place-based team there does is they hold salons, which different participants attend that may be young people, they may be parents, they may be community leaders, community workers, school leaders, and they all come to talk about different areas and different issues as it pertains to education. And by providing that space in that salon for those dialogues is very impactful because those dialogues may not happen on any other, in any other way or on any other media. Okay, so I'm going to move down to information as it pertains to our place-based work. As we mentioned earlier, we have place-based organizing efforts in Puerto Rico, in Vermont, Oregon, Jackson, Minnesota, and Boston, and we're working to seed groups in Milwaukee and New Orleans. The levels of engagement for each group is different because, as we mentioned earlier in one of our other briefings, the work and the focus is different. So whereas the Minnesota team may focus on having the actual dialogues in place, Vermont may focus on proficiency-based graduation requirements, whereas Puerto Rico may work on connecting the schools and community through work through Nuestra Escuela. So that's one of the key things and one of the biggest things that I actually love about the place-based organizing model, because it's not one set top-down model that's developed by a national organization that all groups need to align with and follow, because that's not the way organizing or organizing together and building around education is going to be successful. We also have relationships with organizations in many other areas, to include New York, Detroit, Colorado, Washington State, Little Rock, and Chicago. And a lot of that is because we have organizers from years past and present that actually live in those different areas. Okay, we only have 7 more minutes, so I wanted to check and see if there were any questions. I noticed we have 2 viewers online, and I don't want to get too far ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what's way to wrap up or useful or keep, if folks can add questions in Q&A or ways to just tie this together in relation to the beginning of the, what we're trying to cause.
Yeah, and I didn't want to go too far in because I know with the place-based focus, we're going to have a session in depth about that tomorrow. And then also with, some of the financial and budgeting information, we're having a session on that later this week during Idea Camp. All right. So just to close us out, back in the PowerPoint, one of the things I thought was important, and what we were hoping was that perhaps some different organizations or individuals would, and if you would like to, as you're watching this live stream or recording later, what we've done is linked in the actual Destination Postcard activity, if that's something that you or your organization would like to actually walk through together to see exactly where you want to go and what you're trying to cause, as we did with IDEA. And it's linked here, and I'll also link it on the Google Plus site for everyone to see. All right, Scott, Dana, or Sean, is there anything else that you would like to say in closing or in addition to?
I was trying to channel Malia. If she were on here, what might she be thinking about or saying? And my guess is the Destination Postcard language and stuff comes from the Heath brothers' work, and the little activity invokes this language around the rider and the elephant, which will only be helpful if people have read or have some familiarity with the book at the top of the presentation, Crystal, that you shared. But the concepts are really just that it's important to try to be clear about what you're trying to cause, and part of that is having the emotional appeal, and part of that's trying to know the journey you're trying to head on. And I think ideas of 5-year-long journey of trying out different things with, I think, a pretty core emotional pull and different understandings of where that, to use the elephant as the emotion, where that journey is traveling, and what's necessary or needed, and the effort that has been gone through to reiterate a kind of more updated cause statement is actually tied to the idea of trying to get simpler and more precise and be less confusing. Because we recognize that sometimes the kind of connecting the dots, showcasing, linking can be confusing. We're not a program provider. We don't provide curriculum. We don't sell a lot of direct projects. We don't build a school model. And so how to evoke what we're doing in a way that might make more sense. And we'd certainly love feedback from anybody who reads this statement and checks out IDEA, or who's familiar with IDEA, or who's working with it, to say, does this do a better job of capturing that in a way that makes sense? We hope so. It's not a finished product. And I hope, it's, for me personally, I hope it won't ever will be, because part of what makes, I think, IDEA interesting to me is that this gets refreshed, that it's a constant question, because to me that keeps us tapped into the idea of things that are actually emerging and moving, that aren't just about ourselves as an organization. So, I not sure, Malia would probably have said it better than I did, but trying to think about how she'd add to it so she can be with us, and thanks, Crystal, for putting it together.
No problem. I think you channeled the inner Malia pretty well.
She's got good words. She's got good words.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't have a question, but we do have a comment from one of our organizers in Oregon, Darcy Bedortha. Hey, team. I hope it has been awesome. Good to hear your voices. Thanks for joining us, Darcy. Glad that you're viewing.
Thanks.
Awesome.
And for the history of this kind of an exercise, it is an ongoing thing in terms of what are we trying to cause, and it should be. But for I think it's going on 3 to 4 years ago now. But the first time we tried to do this, we called it what is the napkin, and we tried to fit a phrase onto a napkin. It is the challenge again of doing something too short, but this is the updated kind of what is the goal? What are we looking to do on a napkin? And I always think back to Justo Mendez for showing us so clearly the vision for his work with Nuestra Escuela, and the clarity of that vision. I think is always been an inspiration for me, for us to have clarity on where we're going and what are we doing this all work for, and that's really what this conversation is all about. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. We will not be having any open sessions at 6:20 as originally scheduled, but we will pick those back up tomorrow evening. These video recordings will also be linked to our Idea Hub, and if you'd like that link, we'll put that on the Google Plus event page as well. Thanks for joining us, and have a good rest of the evening.